All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to talk about a simple three-word phrase. But this wasn't just any phrase. This one was so dangerous, so explosive, that it got its author kicked out of his community and pretty much turned Western thought completely on its head.
And here it is. Deus sive natura. God or nature. I know, it sounds super simple, right? But back in the 17th century, this idea from the philosopher Baruch de Spinoza was so radical, so far out there, that he was literally excommunicated for it. And you have to ask, why? Well, it's because it forces us to rethink, well, everything. Our idea of God, of reality itself, and our own place in the universe.
So, what was the big deal? What made this little phrase so explosive? To really get why this was such a bombshell, we need to rewind a bit and look at this huge philosophical puzzle that everyone, and I mean everyone, was wrestling with at the time.
Okay, so the puzzle everyone was obsessed with was the mind-body problem. You've probably heard of it. And the guy who really framed it, who put it on the map, was the philosopher René Descartes. And let me tell you, he set up a challenge that seemed, well, basically impossible to solve.
And the question he posed was this: how can your mind, this non-physical thinking thing, the ghost inside you, how can it possibly control your physical body, which is just a machine made of flesh and bone, right? How does the invisible stuff push around the visible stuff? That was the giant mystery.
So Descartes' answer was something we now call dualism. He basically said, look, reality is made of two totally different kinds of stuff. You've got the mind, what he called res cogitans, that's the thinking stuff. And then you have the body, or res extensa, that's all the physical stuff. He saw them as two completely separate worlds. And his best guess for how they connected? He thought they somehow mysteriously interacted through a tiny little gland in the brain. Yeah, really.
But then along comes Spinoza. He looks at this whole puzzle and says, you're all asking the wrong question. He just completely throws out the idea of two separate worlds. And instead, he proposes something so radical, so mind-blowing, there's only one reality.
Okay, to really get what he's saying, we've got to understand a couple of his key terms. First, he argues there is only one substance, and this is absolutely crucial. This isn't some old man in the sky, a personal God who created the universe and then just watches from the sidelines. No. For Spinoza, the substance is the entire universe. It's the whole shebang, the single system of reality that contains everything. And what does he call it? You guessed it, God or nature.
So you have this one massive substance, and it expresses itself in an infinite number of ways. Spinoza calls these attributes. But here's the catch, and this is a really key point. Our tiny, limited human minds, we can only perceive two of them. Just two out of infinity.
And what are those two attributes we can perceive? Well, they're going to sound pretty familiar. The first is thought. That's the entire world of ideas, consciousness, the mind. The second is extension, the entire world of physical stuff, objects, bodies. So you see what he did? Where Descartes saw two totally separate substances, Spinoza saw two different expressions of the exact same thing.
This is the real kicker right here. For Spinoza, a mental event, like feeling happy, and a physical event, like serotonin flooding your brain, aren't two different things. They are the exact same event. We just perceive it through two different lenses, two different attributes.
That's it, exactly. They're just two sides of the same coin. A thought doesn't cause a chemical reaction in your brain. A thought is that chemical reaction, just viewed from the inside. The ghost and the machine, they're one and the same. So that whole mind-body problem that had everyone stumped, for Spinoza it wasn't a problem at all. It was just a misunderstanding from the get-go.
Okay, but hold on a second. If everything, every thought we have, every action we take is just one tiny part of this giant single system called God or nature, a system that operates according to its own unbreakable laws, what on earth does that mean for free will?
I mean, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? If the universe, or God, or nature is just unfolding with absolute necessity, like a perfect machine, and we're just cogs in that machine, are we really making free choices? Or is it all just predetermined? And Spinoza's answer is, you guessed it, another bombshell. He basically says that what we call free will is an illusion. It's a fantasy. We think we're free simply because we're aware of what we're doing. But, he says, we are totally clueless about the incredibly complex chain of causes that made us do it in the first place. So instead, he offers a totally different definition of freedom. It goes like this. Step 1, you have to recognize that your passions, your emotions, are just determined reactions to things happening outside of you. Step 2,
You use your reason to really understand what those causes are. And step 3, once you understand why you feel and act the way you do, you can stop being a slave to your passions and start acting with real clarity and purpose. That, for Spinoza, is what true freedom looks like.
And you might think these ideas just kind of faded into obscurity, right? Nope, not at all. About a century after Spinoza died, his work came roaring back to life and exploded into one of the biggest intellectual brawls in the history of Europe.
So here's what happened. It all kicked off with something called the pantheism controversy. In 1780, a super famous philosopher named G.E. Lessing is on his deathbed, and he allegedly confesses, "I'm a Spinozist." Whoa. 5 years later, another philosopher, Jacobi, publishes a book spilling the beans on this, and boom, the whole thing just ignites. All of a sudden, you have the heavy hitters. We're talking Kant, Goethe, Herder, all forced to weigh in and grapple with what they saw as Spinoza's dangerous atheism and fatalism.
And what this whole firestorm really shows us is just how powerful Spinoza's ideas were. They became a genuine turning point in philosophy. He basically forced an entire generation of thinkers to stop and re-examine everything they thought they knew about God, about reason, and about our own place in the cosmos.
So that really brings us back to the core of it, and it leaves us with a pretty deep question to chew on. What actually changes if we try on Spinoza's worldview? What if we stop thinking of ourselves as a ghost trapped inside a machine, and instead see ourselves as a completely integrated part of nature, where every single thought we have is also, at the same time, a real physical event? What would that change about the way you see the world and the way you live your life?